Right. So
Yeah.
are you ready? We're going to do a deep dive on the joyful mysteries of the Rosary.
Yeah.
We've got like a ton of stuff here. Transcripts from YouTube videos about praying the Rosary, and then we have some like writings about the meaning and significance of it all.
Yeah. And the rosary is really cool because, it's not just about saying prayers, it's like meditating on these events in the lives of Jesus and Mary.
So it's more than just like the words. It's like thinking about, thinking about it more deeply.
Exactly. Like the beads help us count the prayers. But the mysteries, they help us understand.
So today we're going to be focusing on the joyful mysteries. These are the ones that center around Jesus's birth and his early life. And I'm kind of getting the sense here from looking at all this stuff that we're going to talk about some pretty powerful things like, poverty and obedience.
Yeah.
And like finding joy even when the things are not going your way.
For sure. Absolutely. Those themes are like super relevant even today. Like even though these events happened a long time ago, they still speak to us.
So let's just jump right in. The first joyful mystery, the Annunciation. We have this incredible scene with the angel Gabriel
Oh, yeah.
appearing to Mary
Yeah.
and telling her that she's going to give birth to Jesus.
It's pretty wild, but you can just like feel how important this moment is. And like what's really amazing is how Mary responds. She's told, hail, full of grace.
Right.
And she just accepts this monumental task with like incredible humility.
And I'm noticing that a lot of these sources are pointing to that phrase, full of grace. What's the significance there?
Yeah, so that kind of ties into this Catholic belief in the Immaculate Conception. So basically it means that Mary was conceived without original sin, and this prepared her to be the mother of Jesus, the Son of God.
So it's like she's the only one that could really say yes because of that.
Right, it's not just about saying yes, it's about being able to say yes. Like she was prepared.
Yeah.
There's one source that calls it like abandoning the ego drama for the theodrama.
Wow.
It's a pretty cool way to put it. We're all invited to, step out of our own little stories, our own self-centered stories, and embrace this like much bigger story that God has for us.
That's deep. It makes you think about like all those times where you get so caught up in your own little drama.
Totally. It's a good reminder to like surrender to God's will, even when it doesn't make sense to us, because that's often the path to finding real joy.
Okay, let's move on to the second joyful mystery, the visitation. So we have the scene of Mary going to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who also happens to be pregnant.
Right, and remember, Elizabeth is like way older than Mary, and she's in the like later stages of her pregnancy. It's a super long journey, and Mary goes out of her way to go help her cousin, which really like shows us that like core Christian value of charity and love
for your neighbor.
And then we have this amazing exchange of greetings. Elizabeth says to Mary, "Blessed are you among women."
I know, right? And that's such a big deal because Elizabeth is filled with the Holy Spirit, and she like immediately recognizes the holiness in Mary, the fact that she's carrying Jesus. It's like she can see the divine presence just like radiating from Mary.
Sometimes I forget about how powerful those little everyday encounters can be. It reminds me to pay more attention to the people around me.
Totally. It's so easy to get caught up, in our own lives. But the visitation is like this reminder to be present for others, to recognize the spark of the divine in every person we meet.
And then Mary responds with the Magnificat, "My soul magnifies the Lord," which is such a powerful prayer of praise and humility.
Yeah, the Magnificat shows us like how deep Mary's faith is and her trust in God. Even though she's facing this like extraordinary situation, she stays grounded, recognizing that all her blessings are coming from God.
It's like a good reminder for all of us to stay humble no matter what, no matter what's going on. Okay, let's move on to the third joyful mystery, the Nativity. So this is the event that we celebrate at Christmas, with the birth of Jesus in a stable. And a lot of these sources, they emphasize the simplicity and poverty of like the setting.
Yeah, one source actually says that Jesus chose to be born among the poor to teach us that true wealth isn't about material possessions, which is like a pretty radical concept, especially today.
I know you'd think that the Son of God would be born, like at a palace or something, surrounded by luxury, but instead, it's this humble stable with shepherds as the first visitors.
Exactly. And don't you think that like choice of setting is a deliberate challenge to like our assumptions about power and wealth and what it means to be great?
I think so. Like it makes you wonder how different our world would be if we valued simplicity and humility. over like material possessions.
The nativity is like this invitation to reevaluate our priorities.
Yeah.
You know, who are we spending time with? Where are we putting our energy? These are all questions that the nativity makes us think about.
Powerful stuff. All right, let's move on to the fourth joyful mystery, the presentation. So this is where Mary and Joseph take the baby Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem, as required by Jewish law.
Yeah, it seems like just like an ordinary religious thing to do, but it's in the temple that they meet Simeon, who prophesies about Jesus' destiny and Mary's future sorrow. It's a moment that foreshadows both the joy and the suffering that are to come.
It's interesting what Simeon says to Mary, a sword will pierce your own soul too. It's like, even in this joyful mystery, there's this hint of sadness.
Right, the joyful mysteries aren't about like ignoring the hard parts of life. They acknowledge that joy and sorrow, like triumph and suffering, are often like intertwined.
Yeah, that makes these mysteries feel a lot more real to me.
For sure.
More relatable, you know.
The presentation reminds us that faith doesn't protect us from pain, but it gives us the strength to go through it, knowing that God is with us.
All right, and that leads us to the fifth joyful mystery, the finding in the temple. This one really gets to me. You know, we have 12-year-old Jesus, who's basically missing for 3 days. Can you imagine, like, the stress Mary and Joseph must have been going through?
Oh, I know, right? It's like every parent's worst nightmare. And then they finally find Jesus in the temple, having these deep discussions with the religious teachers.
Even as a kid, he's got this wisdom and understanding.
Right.
It's incredible.
And what's really interesting is his response to his parents. When they finally find him, he says, "Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?"
Oh, wow.
It's almost like he's like gently correcting them, like reminding them of his true purpose, even though they might not get it yet.
That must have been so confusing for Mary and Joseph.
I know.
But they still chose to trust, even when they didn't have the answers.
That's the main point here. The importance of seeking God above all else, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense. And trusting that God's plan, even when we can't see it, is ultimately for our good.
That's a hard lesson, but an important one. And you know what? This is making me want to dive even deeper into each of these mysteries.
Me too. There's so much there.
So we've covered the first 5 joyful mysteries.
And I bet you're starting to see how these stories full of meaning and how they're relevant to our lives today.
Absolutely. And stick with us as we uncover even more insights in the next part of our deep dive.
You know, it's amazing how the joyful mysteries capture both the joy and like the complexity of like human experience. They're not just like sweet stories. They weave together like, you know, joy and sorrow, challenge, and ultimately this like profound hope.
Yeah, it's what makes them so relatable. It's like they're saying, hey, life is messy, but like you can still find booty in it.
Exactly. And let's not forget, like the most mind-blowing part of all of this, the fact that like God chose to become human, be born in some like
a vulnerable baby. That's like a huge statement about God's love for humanity. One of the sources described Mary as like a most elevated creature, but isn't that kind of like a paradox? Like she's chosen for this incredibly important role, yet her response is all about humility and surrender.
Yeah, it is a beautiful paradox. And maybe that's the point. Like true greatness is often found in humility and recognizing that like we're not the center of everything.
Yeah. It makes me think about the visitation, how Mary doesn't go to Elizabeth to like brag or show off. She goes to offer support and love when Elizabeth needs it.
Right, and Elizabeth recognizes the holiness in Mary, even though it's hidden from the world. So it's like this reminder to treat everyone with that same respect, like recognizing
the inherent dignity
and
worth of every person.
And speaking of like hidden holiness, the nativity, the fact that Jesus, the King of Kings, is born in a stable, that's almost scandalous.
It totally flips our expectations upside down. It challenges like our ideas about power and wealth and prestige. It's like God is saying, look, I'm not found in palaces. I'm here with the humble
and the marginalized.
Yeah. One of the sources even said that Jesus being born in poverty is like a call to action for us. It challenges us to like detach from material things and to love and serve those who are less fortunate.
Absolutely. It's a powerful message, especially in our culture, that tells us we need to buy stuff to be happy. The Nativity reminds us that true happiness comes from somewhere else, from our relationship with God and with each other.
Okay, so the presentation, that prophecy from Simeon about the sword piercing Mary's soul, that's heartbreaking.
It is, but it also shows us Mary's unwavering faith, even in the face of suffering. Like she's given this glimpse into the future, this knowledge of the pain That's going to come. But she doesn't waver in her commitment to God's plan. That's incredible strength.
Yeah, it's a powerful example,
Yeah.
especially when we're going through our own challenges and hardship.
Totally. It reminds us that faith isn't about avoiding suffering. It's about facing it with courage and trust, knowing that God is with us the whole time.
And the finding in the temple, that mystery really gets to me as a parent. That feeling of losing your child, even for a short time, it's terrifying.
I know, it's like a universal fear. And yet, Mary and Joseph find Jesus doing something so important, deepening his understanding of his mission.
Yeah, he's only 12, but he's already focused on his Father's business.
And then it reminds us that we also have a mission. You know, we're called to discover our purpose, to use our gifts, to serve God and others. And sometimes that journey might take us to unexpected places, just like Jesus ended up in the temple.
Yeah, and it's also a reminder that it's okay to take some time to figure things out. Even Mary and Joseph didn't understand at first.
There's a lot we might not understand in our own lives, but we can trust that God is guiding us, even when the path isn't clear.
And that's where faith comes in.
Right.
We may not have all the answers, but we can trust that God is working everything out for our good, even when we can't see it.
Exactly. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting in God's love and wisdom, even when we don't understand.
You know, the joyful mysteries they give us, these incredible examples of faith in action. Like we see ordinary people, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, responding to God's call with humility and trust, even when it's scary or confusing.
They're not just stories, they're models for how we should live.
And I'm also struck by how these sources talk about praying the rosary with both your body and spirit. What does that even mean?
So it's about engaging all of your senses, your emotions, your imagination. It's not just saying words. It's like stepping into the story. Imagine the smells of the stable, the warmth of Elizabeth's embrace, the confusion on Mary and Joseph's faces when they can't find Jesus.
So it's like we're supposed to experience these mysteries right alongside the people who live them.
Exactly. The rosary isn't just some mental exercise. It's a way to connect with the mystery of God's love in a deeper, more like embodied way.
Yeah. And that brings us back to joy. The joyful mysteries, they're not just about happy events. They're about a deeper kind of joy that comes from being connected to God and living a life of purpose.
Yeah. A joy that stays with you, even when things are hard and you're not sure what to do. It's a powerful message for everyone, no matter who they are or what they believe.
It really is. It makes me want to spend more time thinking about each of these mysteries.
Same. There's so much to discover.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we've really spent some time with these joyful mysteries, the Annunciation, the Visitation, the Nativity, the Presentation, and the finding in the temple. I don't know about you, but they're really starting to open up for me. Like each one is a different way of looking at not really Jesus's life, but our own lives too.
Yeah, it's like they're giving us this map for the spiritual journey and now like highlighting the challenges and the virtues that can help us along the way.
And even though we call them mysteries, it doesn't mean they're supposed to be confusing or like out of reach. It's not like we're supposed to just scratch our head and say, that's a mystery.
Right. The word mystery here means something that's like bigger than we can understand, something we can keep thinking about and exploring without ever like totally grasping it.
Like a puzzle with infinite pieces and keep putting it together. But the full picture might always be a little bit elusive.
Exactly. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Rosary. It lets us come back to these mysteries again and again. And each time, we might find something new.
You know, all these sources, they all really emphasize that the Rosary is supposed to be a contemplative experience. It's not just about saying the words. It's about like entering into the story and letting it touch your heart, like those sensory details you were talking about, the smell, the sounds, the emotions.
Right, that's where the real power is. As we meditate on these mysteries, they start to change us from the inside out. They affect our thoughts, our actions, and even how we are in the world.
It makes you think about how repetition can be powerful, not in like a mindless way, but as a way to really absorb something over time, like a musician practicing scales or an athlete perfecting their technique.
Totally. Each time we pray the Rosary, it's like we're training our minds and hearts to be more in tune with God. We're working on those virtues of humility, charity, obedience, and trust that we see in the joyful mysteries.
So it's not just about thinking about these mysteries, it's about letting them transform us.
Yeah.
Because ultimately,
Show us a way
to a more joyful life.
Exactly. They remind us that true joy doesn't depend on our circumstances or what we own. It comes from our connection with God and living a life that's aligned with our purpose.
And that's something that everybody needs to hear, no matter who they are or what they believe. Because we all want that deep, lasting joy.
Yeah, it's part of being human.
So if you're listening and you're feeling lost or confused or just need some inspiration, maybe the joyful mysteries can give you a new way of looking at things. What if you spent some time with the Annunciation? Put yourself in Mary's shoes or walked with Mary during the visitation and felt that generosity and love, or sat in the stable.
And thought about
the humility
of the nativity. Yeah, let the mystery of the presentation with its joy and sorrow draw you in, and look for the wisdom in the finding in the temple. Remember that God's plan might not always make sense to us, but it's always leading us towards something good.
We can get so caught up in our busy lives that we forget to stop and think about these important things. The joyful mysteries invite us to slow down, to connect with something bigger.
And that's where the real adventure starts.
It is, because exploring these mysteries, it's not just a one-time thing, it's a lifelong journey. So keep going deeper, keep searching, keep trusting. The rewards are huge.
I love that.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the joyful mysteries of the Rosary. We hope it gave you something to think about, and maybe even a little more hope and joy.
And remember,